Jerusalem had risen, the temple stood. A city once claimed by shepherds and kings had become a beacon of faith, but power draws envy and sanctity invites conflict. The first temple, once the pride of a nation, would soon face fire and ruin. How did the holiest place on earth fall? Twice? And how did Jerusalem survive the empires that tried to erase it? This is the story of conquest, return, and resistance. This is the fall of the temples. Babylonian conquest and the first destruction, 586 BCE. By the 6th century BCE, the kingdom of Judah was trapped between superpowers. Babylon, under the fierce leadership of King Nebuchadnezzar II, had already conquered the Assyrians and now turned its gaze toward Jerusalem. Judah had been a vassal state but rebelled, hoping Egypt would come to its aid. That hope was crushed. In 587 BCE, the Babylonians laid siege to Jerusalem. The siege lasted over a year, cutting off supplies and weakening the people within. Disease, starvation, and fear filled the city. By 586 BCE, the Babylonian army breached the walls. What followed was complete devastation. The invaders destroyed homes, looted treasure, and executed or enslaved thousands. But the greatest tragedy was the destruction of Solomon's temple, the very heart of Jewish worship and identity. The Babylonians stripped the temple of its gold, silver, and sacred objects. Then they set it on fire. Its walls crumbled, and the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred relic of the Israelites, disappeared, never to be seen again. Jerusalem was left in ruins. Its people, princes, priests, and commoners, were taken into exile in Babylon. For the first time in their history, the Israelites had no land, no temple, and no king. It was a moment of profound loss, but also the beginning of a new phase, one where faith would be carried not in a place, but in memory and text. Return under Cyrus the Great, 538 BCE. Nearly 50 years after Jerusalem's destruction, hope arrived from the east. The Babylonian Empire had fallen to the Persians, and with it came a radical shift in policy. The new ruler, Cyrus the Great, believed in religious tolerance and the restoration of conquered peoples. In 538 BCE, he issued a decree that would change Jewish history forever. The exiled Jews were free to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The journey back wasn't easy. Jerusalem was in ruins. The once great city was little more than rubble and ash. But thousands made the long trek, led by figures like Zerubbabel, a descendant of King David, and later Ezra the scribe, who carried with him the memory of the law and traditions. The returnees brought not only building tools but a renewed sense of purpose. Under Persian authorization, they began to lay the foundation of what would become the Second Temple. Though far simpler than Solomon's grand structure, this new temple represented something powerful: survival. But it wasn't without struggle. Samaritans and other neighboring peoples resisted the rebuilding efforts. Progress stalled. It would take decades, and leadership from prophets like Haggai and Zechariah to encourage the people to complete the work. When it was finally finished, the Second Temple became the new heart of Jewish worship, a symbol of restoration and perseverance. Though smaller in scale, its presence confirmed one thing: Jerusalem had risen again, Greek rule and the Maccabean revolt. After centuries of Persian control, a new conqueror emerged, Alexander the Great. By the late 4th century BCE, his armies swept through the Middle East and Jerusalem came under Greek rule. At first, the Jews were allowed to keep their customs, but after Alexander's death, his empire fractured. Jerusalem fell under the control of the Seleucid Empire, one of the successor states. The Seleucid rulers, especially Antiochus IV Epiphanes, sought to unify their empire through Hellenization, the spread of Greek language, culture, and religion. For the Jewish people, this meant rising pressure to abandon their laws, traditions, and even their God. In 167 BCE, Antiochus crossed a line. He entered the Second Temple, erected an altar to Zeus, and outlawed key Jewish practices, including circumcision and Sabbath observance. Sacred scrolls were burned, priests were killed. The temple, once holy, had been turned into a symbol of oppression, but resistance was not far. A rural priest named Mattathias sparked a revolt by refusing to sacrifice to Greek gods. His sons, especially Judah Maccabee, took up the fight. With guerrilla tactics and unshakable faith, the Maccabees waged a war for freedom. Against all odds, they succeeded. In 164 BCE, they recaptured Jerusalem and entered the desecrated temple. They purified it, removed the foreign altars, and rededicated it to God. According to tradition, they found only one jar of oil to light the temple menorah, but it burned for 8 days. This miracle is celebrated today as Hanukkah. The Maccabean revolt was more than a military victory. It was a stand for identity, faith, and sovereignty, and once again the temple stood at the center of it all. Rome arrives. By the 1st century BCE, Jerusalem had survived empires, revolts, and rebirth, but a new force was rising in the west, Rome. The Republic, soon to become an empire, was expanding rapidly into the eastern Mediterranean. Judea, with its location between Egypt and Syria, was too valuable to ignore. In 63 BCE, internal conflict in Judea gave Rome its opening. A civil war had broken out between two Hasmonean brothers, Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II, each claiming the throne. Both appealed to Rome for support, and the powerful general Pompey the Great arrived to mediate. But his solution came with conquest. Pompey laid siege to Jerusalem. Some factions opened the gates to him while others resisted. When the Romans finally took the city, Pompey did the unthinkable. He entered the Holy of Holies within the Second Temple, an act considered a severe violation of the sacred. Though he did not loot its treasures, the act enraged the Jewish population and marked the beginning of Roman control over Jerusalem. To maintain influence, Rome appointed client kings, the most famous of whom was Herod the Great, installed in 37 BCE. Herod was politically astute and fiercely loyal to Rome, though widely distrusted by his own people. To gain favor and legitimize his rule, Herod undertook ambitious building projects across Judea. But his crowning achievement was the renovation of the Second Temple. Herod expanded the Temple Mount, built massive retaining walls, and reconstructed the sanctuary with dazzling white stone and gold. The result was one of the most magnificent religious structures in the ancient world. The Western Wall, still standing today, is a remnant of his work. But Herod ruled with brutality. Heavy taxation, lavish spending, and executions, including members of his own family, made him feared rather than loved. Beneath the architectural splendor of Herod's temple, resentment simmered. Jewish society fractured. Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Zealots debated whether to resist, accommodate, or rise up. Roman governors who followed Herod worsened tensions with disrespect for Jewish customs and cruelty in governance. Beneath the grandeur, Jerusalem became a city on the edge of revolt, and the temple once again stood at the heart of the coming storm. By the early 1st century CE, unrest was growing. Messianic hopes stirred. People waited for deliverance, for a new king like David. And once again, the temple, now more glorious than ever, stood at the center of a storm that would soon erupt into war. The Second Temple had risen from the ashes of exile. It had been rebuilt, desecrated, rededicated, and expanded into a wonder of the ancient world. For generations, it stood as a symbol of survival, identity, and divine connection. But under Roman rule, its foundations shook, not from earthquakes, but from unrest. Beneath the gilded stones and towering walls, tension boiled. Sectarian divisions fractured the people, taxes weighed heavily, prophets and revolutionaries whispered of liberation, and Rome watched with growing suspicion. The city that had survived Babylon, Persia, and Greece now faced its most ruthless enemy. The empire would not tolerate rebellion, and when that rebellion came, it would be met with overwhelming force. In the next episode, Fury and Fire, Rome's Wrath, we follow the final days of the Second Temple, witness the rise of revolution, the march of Roman legions, and the siege that would burn Jerusalem to its core. What happened in 70 CE didn't just end an era. It reshaped the future of a people, a city, and a faith. The storm is coming. Enjoying the journey through history? Make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community of history enthusiasts. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell us what you think, share your favorite historical insights, or suggest a topic you'd love to see us explore. And if you know someone who would love diving into the past, share this video with them. Let's uncover history together.